Among all those warmongers and bloodthirsty space marines, I'm looking at you, psycho space vampires. If there was ever good guys, my pick would go to the Salamanders. And if you are familiar with their lore, you'll know that their primarch, Vulcan, has been one of the few capable of empathy toward baseline humans, showing even compassion where others in the legions might see them as not much more than cannon fodders. So, not only they are total badasses with a history of borderline kamikaze, forge master capable of crafting the most beautiful and deadly weapon, but those obsidian skinned giants actually seem to care about the very people that Space Marines were built to protect in the first place. So, in this video, let's celebrate the actual good guy of the Imperium by showing you how to paint a Salamander Space Marine in a clean, Eavy Metalish style, and I'll throw in some freehand for the fun of it. Let's get started. After priming the miniature with Vario Ghost Grey, I sprayed over a thin layer of Vario Black. You could directly start with a black primer, but I usually prefer to add a layer of the same black that I'll be using while hand painting. Next, I use Violet Red to paint rich purple shadows, spraying it from under in those areas that aren't naturally illuminated. I am using an airbrush here because it is fast and super smooth, but you could very well use a makeup sponge or even dry brushing to achieve a similar effect. This might look a little surprising at first, but will build the foundation of beautiful and subtle shadows that will naturally merge with the green armor. Talking about green, I went for Deep Green by AK Interactive, diluted at 70% with Vario Airbrush Thinner. This is a very pigmented range of paints, and I needed a lot of transparency to build a smooth purple to green gradient. After a few thin layers, I got a good base and the miniature is ready for hand painting. Thanks to the transparency, I can now use the same deep green color to build the first highlights, without having to mix in any paint for the first phase. This might not sound like much, but it both saves time and gives you a perfect color match for your base highlights. As for our previous Space Marine painting tutorials, I'm going here for a Tabletop plus high impact look. And don't get me wrong, there will still be a lot of highlights to marvel at when picking up a single miniature, but I'll be making quicker jump in luminance and there won't be any complex shading beyond the airbrushed base layer. It is also up to you to decide which highlights to keep or cut and adapt to the desired output, whether you are painting for a kill team, a combat patrol, or a full-on army. Spoiler alert, after looking at the finished mini, I am so building a Salamander skill team. The brushes that I am using in this video are DaVinci Maestro Series 35 in size 2, 1 and 00. Great brushes that I strongly recommend if you are looking for quality ones that will last a long time with the right care. The importance of a good steady brush with a larger body and a rather thin tip becomes evident when you want to get serious with edge highlights or freehand painting. The brush isn't of course everything because even the best tool isn't going to give you a third-gen hands. But being able to trace a line without a hair splitting in all directions is definitely a big plus. I actually had a lot of struggle with my hands shaking on this project because I'm dealing at the moment with a sinew and ligament injury in my left arm. Nothing dramatic, but I'll give you later a tip on how to mitigate this kind of issue. Next, I gave a boost to that green by spraying over a few elements with the same deep green color, which will also better blend in the first pass of highlights. Then I used a mix of AK Deep Green and Frog Green to spray over the most illuminated parts of the armor and give some of those panels a punch in vibrancy. Again, a good substitute would be to use a makeup sponge to gently dab the brighter paint over the parts that you would like to highlight. For the second pass of edge highlights, I am jumping straight to pure Frog Green, reducing the surface painted over a smaller section of panels. Using Frog Green, which is already present in the underlying layer for the second phase of edge highlights, makes for a more harmonious and natural blend than if you use an extra color. Sometimes you might actually prefer highly contrasting highlights, favoring wild hues for the sake of artistry or pure cool factor. But for something as down to earth and if you excuse me, often unoriginal as a loyal Space Marine armor, sticking to related colors is likely to give you a much better look. When it comes to edge highlighting, do you find it therapeutic or just plain nerve-wracking? Because let's face it, those rather thin highlights can be a make or break moment, and I am sure we all have highs and lows to share about it. Try to keep those highlights thin and subtle enough without overdoing it. And if you tend to have issues with stabilizing your brush, make sure to use a miniature holder. This not only gives you a more comfortable hold on the mini itself, but also creates a larger surface on which to rest your painting hand. You will often see me reaching with my little finger to rest it against my holder or another finger, to create an opposing tension between both hands, which in turn makes them far more steady. Honestly, without this technique and taking into account my reduced precision due to injury, I would have a hard time completing this miniature. Look at this green chap, how fitting that I painted him on St. Patrick's Day. For the third and final phase of edge highlights, I am using a mix of deep green, frog green and deep yellow, further reducing the surface painted and skipping all but a very few exposed edges. I've been planning on painting a Salamander Space Marine for a very long time, and I'm glad that I finally got to make it for a tutorial to share with you all. I find that there's something particularly appealing about them. And while this is only a base primary Space Marine, exempt of specific ornaments, the draconic theme around their chapter and their backstory is striking home for me. I'm going to use Vario Black and some flow improver to create a wash, and apply it to all the flexible joints. Using a wash consistency rather than regular paint allows me to easily cover the hard-to-reach parts of the model. And while you could very effectively use contrast paint for this, 1. I don't have any contrast paint, and 2. The flow improver stops the paint from immediately setting and makes any mistakes very easy to fix. But Core, those highlights are freaking green on your mini! Yep, but this is not an issue as those highlights are being covered with a light grey, made with a mix of black and ivory. Another pass with the same black wash to help blending those highlights and we are good to go. Oh, look at that! I forgot to paint his freaking right hand, but no worries, nothing that I can quickly and easily fix with 2 passes of precise airbrushing and using the paint already on my palette to replicate those edge highlights. Time to go bling bling with Citadel Retributor Armor mixed to some flow improver. As I previously explained, this additive delays the paint drying time, which is particularly handy in case of spilling metallic flakes over this beautiful green. I also find that it is improving how Citadel metallics behave. Let's highlight the Imperialis by adding Citadel Canoptech alloy to the previous Retributor armor and gently brushing it over those edges. And then using the same colors with the dominance of Canoptech alloy to paint the Flamer barrel casing. My paint is quite diluted and requires 2 layers for clean coverage. I went for Citadel Winlow Brass to paint the fuel canister. This is a pretty interesting color that will look quite nice after some shading. Let's switch to Citadel Leadbeater to paint the initial nozzle, the tip of the barrel, and a few other elements. And while we are at it, let's use the same color to paint a very few metallic bits on the armor. Back to the flamer with black for the body. I think that this part would actually look great painted in red, but I went for black to avoid introducing yet another color that would clash with the green armor. It is really a matter of preference, but I personally like to keep my palette limited to just a few colors. Leadbeater was then again used to paint those various bits. Time for some shading with Citadel Non-Oil. Applied sparingly in a few recesses. Then Citadel Reclaim Flame Shade that I apply all over the brass canister to give it a richer tone. This shade really brings the base color to another level and looks as good on brass as on the Retributor armor that I use for painting the Imperialis on this chest. I'm using Canoptech alloy to highlight the parts previously painted with Leadbeater. Just a little touch here and there that won't be particularly visible here on camera due to the reflective nature of metallic paints. Now for the barrel casing, I am adding some Vario Silver to the Citadel Canoptech alloy. I'm highlighting the frame and those cooling vents with the small edge highlights at the bottom of each of them. and while at it, I use the same color to add final highlights to my metallics. Back to Reclaim Face Shade to add a super cool heat effect on the casing. And while I'm applying this shade with an airbrush, you can again achieve the same effect with a normal brush. Next, Violet ink, for a second pass at the extremity of the casing and making sure to not overdo this color, by progressively bringing the flow from outside the weapon toward the tip of the casing. You could also do this by using contrast paint mixed to a glaze medium. To highlight the black body, I'll be using various ratios of black and ivory, progressively brightening the mix to paint smaller and smaller edge highlights. I also added a bit of weathering, as weapons are usually the first pieces of equipment to get scuffed. Just as for the brass on the fuel canister, I am using Reclaim Flame Shade to give the Retributor armor on the Imperialis a richer tone and more depth. Let's paint the helmet lenses with the first pass of ivory, followed by luminous orange by AK Interactive, a very intense color that requires a bright undercoat. To get the fairy look, I added a light wash of red delicately applied over the luminous orange. And finally, ivory to paint tiny light reflections on opposing sides of each lens. Not the most intricate lenses, but that will do the job well enough. I actually also painted a bare head variant for this model. Let me know in the comment if you'd like to see an easy tutorial on how I painted his obsidian skin. Let's quickly take care of the Power Pack Metallics with Lead Belcher. Now, about this black Power Pack. It is a bit unconventional compared to the typical chapter color schemes, don't you think? What's your opinion on matching versus contrasting Power Packs? Would you rather have them blend with the rest of the armor or stand out like the Salamanders? I personally think that black works pretty great here. Oh look, details that nobody is going to notice. Following the same color scheme as for the Flamer, I'm highlighting the Power Pack with a mix of black and ivory. Freaking OCD and painting things that can't be even seen after assembly. Alright, we are approaching the fun part, but let's first paint those shoulder pads in black. 2 or 3 very thin layers to achieve a smooth and clean look. A base of ivory for those lights on his left forearm, and AK blue and orange fluorescent paints on the top of it. Do you have an issue with transfers and painting single miniatures for a tutorial? Games Workshop doesn't sell transfer sheets with mixed Space Marine chapters, and even the one in the 4K starter set shows no love for the Salamanders. And why I might consider purchasing the Salamander upgrade kit to build a kill team, or maybe while I freehand chapter symbols on those shoulder pads. I am starting with a rough sketch for the flame using a very diluted paint. And instead of trying to paint a perfect shape right away, I refine it from the outside using the same Vario black until I am satisfied with the result. And finally, after a quick cleanup, the design is complete and we can give it now some color. For that, I am using a mix of deep yellow and luminous orange. This will do the job well enough, and I can now pass on to the second and main freehand, starting with a quick blocking of the shape. Now, freehanding a flame is one thing, but a drake head might be on another skill level, to be fair. Because while nobody is going to notice that your flame has a different shape than the one on the transfer, they definitely will if my drake ends up with a potato head. I am just glad that I don't have to do this on more than one miniature. Freehands are a lot of fun and great for practice, but if it is just about replicating an existing design, I would definitely have used transfers if I had the right ones available. Now, let's make a little cocktail with Vario Mecha Matte Varnish, AK Glaze Medium, and the usual Airbrush Thinner and Flow Improver. This coat will not only protect the miniature, but also help unifying the finish and surface on those two shoulder pads. There are 2 small leather pouches on the back of this model, and I am going to give them the simplest leather paint job with a base of AK Hull Red. And while I have this color on my palette, why not using it to paint the ground? Again, I prefer limiting the amount of different hues, and I just want this base to be quickly painted. I am mixing the same Hull Red to a touch of Sahara Yellow, and use the side of the tip of my brush to highlight the leather. Then, layer by layer, I progressively raise the amount of Sahara Yellow for Hull Red to paint brighter and smaller highlights. You guessed it, I am doing the same for the ground texture. Next, the concrete rubble that I'm going to paint in black to let the miniature stand out. And with Lead Belcher, paint the few rebars that are sticking out in several places on the base. Next, I'll give a little more depth to that ground texture with a quick shading of Reclaim Face Shade, followed by Agra's Earth Shade for some darker areas. And because there's not quite enough edge highlighting on those models, I'll use the same recipe as for the Flamer with a mix of black and ivory, increasing the amount of ivory for brighter highlights. I could have put a little more work on that base, but you didn't click on that thumbnail to learn about how to paint some random base, did you? We are approaching the final stage, but before I can show you the final reveal, I still have a few steps to complete. I'll be using non-oil to better blend those edges to the black surface. I usually like to paint my base rims black, but what about you? Would you have painted it brown? Alright, I have one last thing left to paint, that weird alien thingy at its feet. I am painting it with a mix of violet red and deep red, adding ivory into that mix while painting brighter highlights. And after a light coat of matte varnish to unify the finish on the base, the Salamander Space Marine is now finished. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Feel free to like and share this tutorial to support the channel by tickling the algorithm. And if you like to stay up to date with upcoming videos, why not subscribing? You guys are awesome, thank you for the support, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.